SBO magazine that I always get. They sent out for free to band directors, and I usually look through it. And I looked through the August edition, and didn't see anything there that interests me, and I threw it away. And about a week later, somebody messaged me and says, "Hey, congratulations on your article in SBO magazine." So what?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. I'm excited to announce that Everything Band has joined forces with several other music education-related podcasts to form the Music Teacher Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help students live up to the best that is in them through music. Now onto my episode and this week's guest, Eric Combs. Hi, Eric.
Hi. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. So, Eric, thanks for joining me. So can you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them what you're doing?
Yeah, my name is Eric Combs. I am a middle school band director. This is my 14th year of teaching. I just finished my master's in music education from Eastern Illinois University just a couple months ago, actually. And aside from about a 9-week stint teaching high school band and high school jazz band, high school concert band, and high school marching band, I've pretty well just been a beginning band director for the last 14 years in middle school.
Excellent. And so, Eric, what's your origin story? How'd you get started?
Well, I'll go clear back to let's go back to when I was 11. I live in Olney, Illinois, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere, a little bitty tiny rural town, and that's where I went to middle school. And I remember I started in 6th grade, and I was a saxophone player. I've always been really shy. In fact, I have a touch of social anxiety. I have a hard time speaking with adults. And whenever I was when I was in 6th grade, I loved band because I had a chance to finally make noise in a way that I could express myself, and people were able to listen, and I could share kind of my feelings through my instrument. And I remember one day while I was sitting actually in the band room that I teach in now, the band director said that someday one of the people sitting in the room is probably going to be the person who takes over his job when he retires. And I just knew at that moment in 6th grade, that's going to be me someday. Someday I'm going to be the band director in the room. And that's all I ever wanted to do. So I pursued that, and I went to college at Eastern, which is about an hour from here, and got the closest job I could to Olney, which was in Robinson, about 45 minutes away. Taught there for about 3 years, and whenever the job opened up here, I jumped at it and got it.
So do you have any memories of anything in high school, any pieces that you played or any directors that really sort of inspired you to go into music? What was the decision where you said, I want to be a music teacher?
Well, that was, like I said, it was in 6th grade, and it was the director I had at the time was Don Graham, and he was pretty well my hero at the time. I wanted to be just like him. So I've kind of followed in his footsteps. And luckily, he still lives in town here, and he is the director of our community band, and he's been a huge help to me. That being said, I also had a really great band director in high school, Mark Kays, and I was a good friend of his after I graduated. And in fact, he was one of the groomsmen in my wedding a couple of years later. So I guess you could say I've always really respected the band directors I've had, and I guess I just always wanted to be like them. So that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. Would you say that mentorship, being in the same town you grew up in, and the mentorship from those two former teachers has been a pretty crucial part of what you've been doing?
Yeah, definitely. If it wouldn't have been for those two, I don't think I would have gone into what I did, because I had a good relationship with them. I liked them so much and wanted to be like them. I guess you could say that that's just what I wanted to do. Had it been somebody else, different personality that I clashed with, I doubt I'd be here today.
Yeah. Yeah. So Eric, my listeners may not know your name off the top, but I'm going to tell them right now that the reason why I'm reaching out to you is that you're really active as someone who is helping the community of middle school band directors, and you have several things you're doing online. Can you tell the listeners about your project?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll give you a backstory on that too. Whenever I got out of college at Eastern, and I'll say I love Eastern. In fact, I went back there and I got my master's there, but from talking to other band directors, kind of the story that I'm getting from everybody is none of us, from whatever college we come from, have a really good depth of knowledge on middle school and beginning band curriculum. It's one of those things that it seems like people go into band directing thinking that they're going to teach high school level or college level, and they want to do what the top level. And that's what I wanted too. I also got out of school thinking that I was going to go straight to the high school here in Olney. And that wasn't the case. The job that was open was a middle school job. And I had no experience with middle schoolers or beginners at that point going into my first job. And to tell you the truth, I was awful at it. My expectations of what was going to happen on that first day of teaching, the first couple of weeks of teaching, they were completely off. I came to realize that I didn't really know much about the way that middle schooler thought. I thought they were going to be a lot more immature than what they actually were, if you can believe that. I was putting together lesson plans that were kind of over their heads completely. And I realized that as soon as I started teaching, and I just had to start from scratch. So now I've been doing this for 14 years and starting to get the hang of it. And I had a thought one day that, it would have been nice had I had the opportunity as a beginning band director to visit some other schools and see what they're doing and just see how middle schoolers learn, how beginners learn. And so what I did was probably about 10 years into this gig, I started going around and visiting some other schools in Illinois, some of the top schools. I will say Skokie, Illinois has a wonderful program, and I went up there and watched. And I thought, wow, I should have done this my very first year. And then it kind of dawned on me, well, if that would have been good for me, then that would definitely be good for some of these other first year teachers. So I started, I guess it started on the band director Facebook site, just posting some general comments and information and trying to be uplifting as I could to first year band directors, second year band directors, giving advice. And I started posting some videos, and people were liking them and started messaging me about them and wanted more videos. So I started listening to what they were asking for, and I started up a Facebook site. And it really took me by surprise. Within about a week, I had close to 3,000 followers on that site. Thoughts from a beginning band director is what it's called. And I also started another site called Sound Beginnings, and it's basically just videos of me teaching in the classroom and showing how beginners learn and just showing pacing, classroom management, that kind of thing. And like I said, I wasn't expecting anybody to really follow this, but since they are, I'm trying to keep it going now and just posting videos and comments from everyday teaching.
Yeah, no, it's really great. As I transitioned to a new job teaching beginners, I watched a lot of your stuff just to kind of get ideas. And now it's not my first time teaching, but certainly there are a lot of things about teaching beginners that I had forgotten or never knew.
Yeah, and it's funny. In college, I know we learned how to teach them how to buzz on a mouthpiece or how to make noise on a saxophone, where to put their fingers. And we had to practice that with some other college students that we pulled in. But then we never really said what happens after that. It's like we know how to do the very first week of lessons, but then what do you do for the next 3 years? And I feel like as a profession, we are all just left to kind of figure that out on our own. There's no set curriculum. There's no right way. There's just not a model out there. So I've kind of made it my mission in life, and I'm just starting it to maybe put together a model of what a middle school curriculum should look like. And hopefully I can put that into something. And I want it to be free and available for everybody. It's not something that I'm publishing. I'm just putting it out there on my website, and I'm hoping that people can use that and they won't have to reinvent the wheel like I did.
Yeah, I mean, no question. And I find that we sort of are in a period right now, and maybe I'm just overestimating this or overstating it, but it seems like there's a lot of people out there who are putting together these sorts of materials for beginning band directors.
Yeah, and I'm liking that. I'm starting to see that like on the band director Facebook site or the middle school band director Facebook sites. I think it's something that we're all seeing there's such a need for, just because I saw somebody posted on there the other day that they think of teaching as being getting a teaching license is like getting your license to actually go do your job and figure out what exactly you're supposed to do for the first time. And I know you've probably felt that way this year with starting middle school, and I know I definitely felt that way. So yeah, there is a huge need for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. It's the same at every level, though. No, and when I first started teaching high school, I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I did because I was young, so I thought I had all the answers. Looking back, I had none of them. I had a few, and then teaching college was the same way. That took some time to kind of get used to that. And so now being back at the beginner level, this is all a new learning curve. But it's all still teaching, and so there's a gift for teaching that's common in all levels. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I also think that everybody kind of has their own little niche that they go to as far as what level they want to teach as well. And like I said earlier, I wanted to be a high school band director. Nobody that I know of really says, hey, I want to be a middle school band director. I'm going to teach people how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And to tell you the truth, I hated it. At first, I wanted to quit so badly. And I thought it was the kids. I thought, these kids are awful. They sound awful. They have awful attitudes. And I would go home and I'd tell my wife, I don't want to do this. I chose the wrong profession. She said, stick with it. It's going to get better. And this went on for a good couple of years. And I don't really know at what point it was, but at some point I was sitting down and thinking about my day and how I was enjoying it. And I was excited about it. And it dawned on me, my perception has changed. When did that happen? And I was glad that my wife had talked me into sticking with it. And now I absolutely love it. There is no other grade that I would choose to teach than middle school. It's for me. It's what I love doing, and I'm planning on staying here at this school until I retire if I can.
Yeah, I really like the middle school level. I always have. I find that those kids are really interesting. They're really, really visceral. They feel a lot. Those are good things in the band.
And it's something that I have found that I'm trying to share with the newer teachers, maybe people in the first or second year, is I imagine everybody I've talked to has had pretty well the same story that I have had. You go in, you have all these grand ideas, and then you get backlash from the kids, and you think that's and it's that way with any change of directors ever. I've been through it twice, and I've talked to many people who have done it. You go in, and the kids don't like you simply because you're not the last person. It doesn't matter who that last person was or what they did. If you're not them, they don't like you. And you have to stick through it and hold your ground for a year or two, and pretty soon you'll find out that it's a wonderful job. The kids are cooperative. Once they get used to your routines, they enjoy being around you. And I guess I'm trying to get that idea out to some of those people that might be feeling that.
Yeah, and I think that's true of any job. I know I'm going to go back to my college experience again, but when I took over at a university that for someone, I had the second year class just really didn't like me. And, they fought me for a whole year. And then once they were gone and they were all my freshmen and sophomores, we were good.
And then it's funny because you've only been there for a couple of years. And then whenever it's time to have a new director, they think you've been there forever.
Yeah. Because they don't know any better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are your best advices? What are your best practices for teaching middle school?
Well, like I was saying earlier, you have to kind of stand your ground there for the first year. And I would say that a good rule would be to talk to the old director, talk to the kids who were in the program before, and find out exactly how things were run and if there's any traditions or anything that were in the band before you got there. And then don't try to overhaul things just right off the bat. You're going to have time there. You're going to have time to get that done. But first, just try to make it as smooth a transition as possible. Another thing that has been huge for me is just trying to get a system of organization going, because there is so much office work that goes on in this job, and you don't realize it until you become a band director. It's one of those things that you don't expect. You expect to come in here and direct music all day, but you find out that's like 10% of your job, and then the other 90% of your job is sitting at your desk shuffling papers.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say keep everything that you any letters that you write, any lessons that you write, keep them. Get a filing system, and then you can refer back to those the next year, and that's going to save you a ton of time. So I guess everything I'm saying is kind of going to first and second year teachers. Um, Also, one of the things that I did early on that I found so useful was I'd always have ideas of things that I wanted to change, but I didn't have time to do it during the school year because there was so much going on. So I just started a little computer file that was called Notes for next year. And anytime I'd have an idea pop in my head, I'd type it in as much depth as I could. And then over the summer, I'd go back and read that and I'd try to implement it the next school year. And that was so useful to me. In fact, it was 90 pages by the end of 10 years. And as I go back and I look over that, I can see the evolution of the program and how we started at point A and got to point B. But notes like that, I would say, so you go back and look at them. And the other big one, if you get a chance, I would find out what the good programs are in the area. And for me, I went 5 hours away up to Chicago and just talk to your administration about it. See if you can get a couple of days off, get a sub, see if you can get a hotel room. And some of the best days of my career have been observing other programs. In fact, they've been completely life-changing for me. So I'd recommend that for everybody.
And so do you have any programs that you look at and you really modeled your program after? I know you mentioned the program in Skokie, but are there any other things that you remember that stick out?
Honestly, that is the big one. Now I'm going to pronounce his name wrong because I've been saying it wrong for the last 4 years, but Chip Stefano, I believe is how you pronounce it. Awesome guy. I've spent a couple of days talking with him just about his philosophy on band directing. And the way that I found him was I got some recordings of the Illinois Super State competition and realized that he was one of the bands that wins it pretty well every year. And I thought, okay, he's obviously doing something that's working. And I went up there and observed and found out his school is exactly the same size as ours. I teach in a 6-8 school that's only 450 kids. And the difference being his school is right near Chicago, not far from downtown. And his students are able to take private lessons at the university level or with some of the professional orchestra members there in town. And here I am in Southern Illinois in the middle of a cornfield. And if anybody wants to take a lesson at a university, they're going to have to drive an hour away. So it just doesn't happen. But what I ended up doing to try to model my program after his was I thought, okay, we need private lessons for these kids, but there's no private lesson teacher. So I was really blessed in that our school got a grant several years ago for any teacher who wants to, and it's through the state of Illinois. Any teacher who wants to can teach after school from 3:15 to 5:30, and they can get paid $25 an hour for it. And they can teach whatever they want. So there's teachers here that are fishing with the kids. There's teachers doing sewing, sports, chess, and I do music lessons. So it's free to the kids. And that way I can just do private lessons every day after school for a couple hours, 5 days a week. And that was the way that I got around not having a university in the area. Also, he has one heck of a good honor band program, and it meets at 7 a.m. And what I did was I started up a 7 a.m. band also with my honor students. And the thing that has been the best for me is that I've kind of developed a differentiated instruction program here at the middle school to where you can kind of go through the program at whatever speed you want, whatever level you want. Everybody gets their own individualized assignments. They all move at their own pace. And the kids that move really fast end up in the honor band. The kids that are moving a little slower can end up in a band where they're playing music that's easy for them. So that kind of keeps everybody interested and excited about what they're doing, playing at their own level. And I took all that from whenever I went up.
So can you talk a little bit about that differentiated instruction?
Sure. Yeah, that is something, going back to an earlier comment where I said that I kind of had to figure this out all on my own. Early on in my career, for several years, actually, I never went and talked to any other band directors about how they did things. Never went and watched any other band directors. Never even saw any other band directors at any performances or anything. We're so secluded down here. You got to drive a long way to do anything like that. And that's kind of the vibe that I get from all of the band directors down here in Southern Illinois. We're just all secluded and on our own. So I came up with this program kind of from scratch, based off of an article that I read about 10 years ago. And the guy's name was Bob Conger, a professor at SEMO. And he had put together something that he called his rank system. And basically, it's just 100 points that he took out of the Essential Elements books, and you could use any method book for it. And they are arranged in 10 ranks of 10 points each. And then what the kids have to do is they just have to play off one of the points, kind of like band karate, I guess you could say. Play off one of the points perfectly, and if they do, they get a point, and they move on to the next one. And so I contacted Bob and talked to him about this, and he sent me his rank system. What I did is I tweaked it for my own program because, to put it bluntly, I had to go slower with my kids than what he was doing with his kids, and so I had more points in the lower level in the first book before we jump into any of the harder stuff. Then what I do is I have developed these after-school lessons for the kids for their private lessons, and I do private lessons over the summer. Usually get about 50 kids in on that every summer. And I also try to make my lessons during the school day just like 1 or 2 kids in a sectional. And instead of doing a 5-day rotation, I do a 7-day rotation, which helps me to get smaller groups. And then I just put them in based on who's on what point. So when a kid comes in, I listen to the point they're on. We talk about the next point, and I make sure they understand it because I never want to give a kid an assignment that they don't understand. Otherwise, they're going to practice it, they're going to get it wrong, and they're going to learn it wrong, and it's going to be ingrained in their head. So you have to, in my opinion, make sure the kid completely understands it before you give it to them as an assignment, and then they're practicing it to reinforce it. I've got a quote hanging above my computer here that I'm going to read. It's from Lisk, and he says, "Practicing to learn something always ends in failure. Learning cannot occur without understanding the process of a particular task. The difference is not practicing to learn something, but to reinforce skill and knowledge by practicing something that has been learned or taught by a teacher." That one quote has kind of transformed me because I know early on I would give kids an assignment that I hadn't taught them yet. And they would go home, they would practice it incorrectly, and they would come back to their lesson, and they would play it completely wrong. And I get frustrated about that. That also kind of ties into classroom management. I was frustrated that the kids were talking so much during class, and I just thought it was the age level of kids. So anyway, and I'm kind of borrowing a bit from David Newell here and his books on classroom management and teaching rhythm. But I found that if you give a kid an assignment they don't know, like say, hey, these are 16th notes that go, now take this home and practice it, and they come back and they sound absolutely horrible. You spend the rest of the lesson trying to explain to them how to do that, and then you give it to them again, and they come back and they sound completely horrible, and then you teach it to them by rote, and they haven't learned how to do anything. So I've kind of changed my mindset of the way I do things, where I get them to completely understand a song, and then it's just repetition at home until they can get it perfect, and it helps them to be more literate that way. So then back to your question of the differentiated instruction, I'm giving every kid their own individual assignment based on these points, and then they can just go through them as fast as they want. They can come in before school with me, which I think is fantastic. I have kids coming in at 7:45 in the morning. Usually I have about 30 kids in my room just coming in. They'll be asking to take vocabulary tests. They'll be asking if they can play points for me because they're wanting to get ahead. And I have a little leaderboard up on the whiteboard that says who has the most points in the class. This year we're going to do some class parties where if you get so many points during the 9 weeks, you can go on the parties, swimming parties, bowling parties, skating parties, movie parties, that kind of thing. And we're using smart music also for kids to pass those off at home. So really, the kids are always staying at their own level.
Yeah, one of the things you said in there was talking about teaching the kids privately yourself. I remember all the way back when I was an undergraduate, I remember my college music education professor saying, spend at least 5 minutes, spend some time alone with each student, teach each student, even if it's only for 5 minutes.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. And that's something I didn't do as a first, second year teacher. And that can be rough without having sectionals. I know I didn't have sectionals originally. But you have to know what each kid sounds like. You have to know what their ability levels are. One of the things I could say from the system that I've developed here, borrowing off of Bob Conger, is that I know exactly what every single one of my kids in the program, there's 140 of them. I know exactly what they know, what they don't know, which notes they know, which notes they don't know, what rhythms trip them up. And it's because I'm able to listen to each one of them individually. So one of the advantages, I think, of this point system that I've made is knowing those things. And then when you step up in front of the band, when you say something, you kind of know how every single one of the kids in the band is going to take it and how they're going to process it and whether they're going to get it or not. So it kind of helps me in deciding how I'm going to present materials in the band class.
All right, Eric. So, it's really interesting, all the stuff you're doing with your program. And I'm interested to know, you say you've been teaching for 14 years. And rather than call them mistakes, what hard-earned lessons did you learn early on that you'd like to share with others?
Okay. Well, the biggest one is something that I mentioned right at the very beginning. When I first started teaching, I hated my job and I wanted to quit. And I thought it was the kids and I thought it was the grade level. And they were disrespectful. They wouldn't listen to me. And over time, it occurred to me that it wasn't them, it was me. It was the issue. I remember one day, my first year, had a horribly rowdy 8th grade group. And I remember standing up in front of them, explaining something in the music to them, and finally realizing nobody in here is listening to me. And I went around the room, there's about 40 kids in the room, and I started in the back of the room and said, "Hey, you over there, could you tell me what it was I was just talking about?" No. Okay, next person. No. Next. I went around the entire room. The flute player sitting right in front of me was able to tell me what I said. And I blamed them for it. And looking back, that totally was not their fault. I've put different classroom management strategies in effect. And the big one is this differentiated instruction. It turns out that if you're giving kids music that's over their head, they're going to disengage and they're going to talk to their friends and they're not going to really care about what they're doing. And they're not going to be into it. And that was the problem that I was having. The music wasn't connecting with them. It wasn't at their ability level. And I had lost them. They didn't care to listen because they knew they weren't going to get anything out of it anyway. So that has changed. What I've done at the middle school is I've made different ability level bands based on where kids are as far as this point system that we have. And that way, I know exactly what every kid in the band has been able to master, and I'll give them music based at that ability level. For instance, if they make it past rank 4, then they are able to play and sight read everything in the first essential elements book. They can play at about a grade 1.5 level sight reading, and so that's the music that I give them in that band. My more advanced band, they're able to sight read grade 3 level music, so I give them grade 3 level music, and we just play a whole bunch of that. And that has helped with classroom management so much.
Yeah, we've talked about David Newell a little bit, and you mentioned that you're a friend of his, and you sort of formed a relationship. In his book, he talks about the consequences. Mm-hmm. And some schools, the one I teach at, for example, consequences, we can't do that sort of consequence. What's the way around that?
People ask me this question a lot, and they also ask me, do I do all of these consequences in David Newell's book? I'd like to say I love that book, the classroom.
Oh, yeah, it's great stuff in there.
I can't quote the title exactly, but it's something like Pin Drop Quiet Rehearsals and Performances.
Yeah, Pin Drop, yeah.
Anyway, I don't do all of the consequences that are in the book. I think they're great. I know people do them, but people ask me, what happens when you do have a major discipline problem in your classroom? And I don't have a good answer for that because, to be quite honest, I haven't really had a major discipline problem in my classroom for several years now. When I first started, I was giving out detentions like crazy. I just kept the pad of paper there, the detention form, and I would write out 10 of them a day and just pass them out. And I don't do that anymore. Now, if a kid's tardy 3 times in my class, they get a lunch detention, and I might give a couple of those out, and they know that that's going to happen, and they're fine with it. Same thing with having to go to the bathroom more than 3 times in a quarter, which is only a 30-minute class, so lunch is right afterwards. So, but as far as yelling stuff out in class and that kind of thing, or playing whenever they're not supposed to be playing, yeah, that's going to happen in every classroom. But I think with the differentiated instruction and the atmosphere that has arisen with everybody having music that's right at their level, and because of that, they don't have questions that they're having to ask the people around them because they know the answers to them already. Or if they do possibly have a question, what I do is I don't do chair rankings. I know who has the most points and who has the least amount of points, and I will sometimes just intersperse them so that it's every other person, so that somebody who's struggling with something is going to be sitting right next to the first chair person. And that way they can kind of lean over and ask them a question. They're not having to shout across the section to ask somebody who knows the answer. But no, I tell the kids that whenever I stand on the podium, it's time for you to be silent, and no talking while the teacher's working, no playing unless I tell you to play. I police that heavily right at the very beginning. Another thing that one of my student teachers actually taught me, Andy Flynn, is whenever he would step up to the podium, he would have the whole band play a tuning note, and he would wait until everybody was paying attention, then he'd cut them off. I loved that idea, and I stole it from Andy, and I've been doing it ever since. I'll take attendance. They know that they're supposed to go in and have a seat, warm up. I'll step up to the podium. They play their tuning note. I'll look around to make sure everybody's ready. And then immediately, as soon as I cut them off, I'll start telling the announcements for the day, and then we'll go straight into the first song. And I deliberately will get off the podium for them to have some time to talk for a couple of minutes. And I try to do that every 10 minutes or so. Step back onto the podium, we'll be silent. And really, that's the way that it goes every single day. So consequences is something that I don't really have to deal with. There have been a couple of kids that I've had to have conferences with their parents because of things like not playing in class, but not really behavior issues other than that.
Most teachers know that after a few years, once you understand classroom management and you can do it, then all those big problems melt away.
They do. Yeah, they run themselves. If you have a good system, and if you police it heavily, right, you can't let the kids get away with things gradually, because they're gradually going to get away with more and more and more. If the first day you tell them, hey, I want you to be quiet as soon as we start here and don't talk after the cutoff, well, when they start doing it, you have to immediately tell them to stop. In fact, the very first day of class, and my sixth grade band doesn't start meeting as a full group until October, the first week of October, and I'm gonna put videos of this on my site so people can see it. But the first day of class, what I do is I tell them, this is what I want you to do whenever you come into the room. Here's how I want you to get your instrument out, where I want you to sit, what I want you to do. When I stand up to the podium, this is what you're going to do, and then we practice it and we make a game out of it. So I'll say, hey, if I'm off the podium, you can play and you can talk all you want. When I stand up on the podium, I want you to immediately get silent. And so now we're going to practice it. And I step off, and they make all kinds of noise, and they love it. I say, see how quickly you can get quiet. I step up to the podium, they immediately get quiet. We do that a couple of times, and they have fun with it. And then I say, okay, we're going to do number 1 in the book. I'm going to stop you in the middle of it, and I want you to immediately get silent. We're going to practice doing it and see how good of a job you can do. And, of course, they do it. They don't mess around with it. And then gradually we start working on some other songs, but my goal is during that class period, I'm not really doing anything musically to teach them anything about the music. What I'm doing is I'm actively listening for people to do what I told them not to do, so that I can tell them immediately not to do it. And you do that for a week, and the rest of the year just falls into place.
Yeah, I had to keep doing that with my fourth graders. They don't. They take a little longer.
I've never taught fourth graders, so I don't know. I've taught 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
Yeah, the fourth graders, they forget their rules a lot.
I'm sure. Can't help any either. I've never done it, but 6th graders, I know, and I start 6th graders. I've heard from people that have started at 6th grade and started at 4th grade that the general consensus on people is by the time they reach 7th grade, they're at the same level, no matter where they started, 4th or 6th grade. Yeah, it's an
interesting phenomenon. I've heard that also.
So that's kind of why I teach 6th grade, because I figured they're more mature, if you can call a 6th grader mature. They're more mature, and they're able to get to the same point. So.
Yeah. I have a pretty interesting setup, but that's neither here nor there. All right, Eric. So we'll do the final questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So I ask these questions of all my guests, and the first one of these is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I am not a huge fan of competition as far as competing against other bands, I guess you could say. And we don't really do that at school here. I'm not saying that's a problem, but I don't like the rivalries that start between neighbor towns. I'd rather work together, and have some community events where the groups can get together and enjoy being around each other. That being said, I do think it's a great thing to go to like solo and ensemble contests, to the organizational contests. And whenever I compete with my band, we're competing against ourselves. We're competing against what we know that we're able to do and capable to do and what we did last year. And we're trying to stretch the bar for ourselves. And it's not a matter of did we play better than the band that lives in the next town over. So it's a matter of did we grow as a group ourselves. And I try to make it to where the band is proud of what they do with their own ability and their own achievements, and they just compare themselves to where they were at the beginning of the year. To me, comparing other bands, that's nonsense. We just need to work on striving for our own betterment.
Sure, absolutely. So you have a lot of projects. How do you find work-life balance in a career as a music teacher?
Oh boy, that's a big question for everybody. And I have not done a good job of this through most of my career. I will say that now I am. My first several years of teaching, for one, in my first job, I had musicals that I had to teach and general music. And I feel sorry for anybody who has to do all that, because that is a lot of prep. I know firsthand. One thing I really love about the job I have now is it's only band. I do several full bands during the day, and then the rest of it's sectionals. So I'm able to focus on that. But that being said, the first several years, I was pretty well staying at work every day until 7, 8 o'clock. And I'd be here over the weekends. I'd be here on Saturdays, Sundays. Yes, I've come into the band room on Thanksgiving and Christmas before. What I have done the last few years is I've come up with this point system and this curriculum where the program kind of runs itself now. And that was my goal. I told my wife several years ago, I said, I'm going to put in a couple of really, really hard years, knowing that after I finish with it and I get my system set up, then I'm not going to have to do that anymore. And I finally reached that point, which is awesome. So I'm at the point now where I can come into work at 6:45 because I've got a class at 7. I can run through my day, teach my lessons after school, go home, and not come in on the weekends and not spend evenings here, which is great because now I've got kids of my own. And it was a matter of setting up that system where it would run itself. And it kind of feels like I'm not doing much work anymore, but it's because I did so much work in the beginning. And I guess my goal then would be to share this program and what I'm doing here so that other people can have the same experience. Maybe they could use what I'm doing and they'll have some free time at home too. So,
Eric, what are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
I think the biggest challenge, and I'm speaking from a middle school perspective right now, with music education currently, is the fact that we are all left to fend for ourselves as far as curriculum, class structure, scheduling, materials that we use, and just the general outline of how a middle school program should be run. There is no concrete guideposts for this. Now, there's been some good books that have come out recently. I really like I'm trying to remember the name of it. Habits of a Highly Successful Middle School Band Director. Maybe help me on that one. It's a great book that goes over some of the ins and outs of the everyday life of a middle school teacher. But I think that as a profession, we need to start solidifying some of those things and sharing with each other, sharing our own programs. I'd like to see some way for us to be able as a community to come together and share our own programs with each other and see what's going on in other programs and see the other curriculums so that we can get an idea of what's out there.
All right, Eric, what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a good one. My younger self was oblivious to what this job entailed. And I really didn't know what this job entailed until I started doing it. What I wish that I could do is that I could go back and give these videos that I'm making to my younger self so that I could see what good classroom management looks like, what good curriculum looks like, how to give kids individualized instruction. Obviously, I can't do that. So I wish that I could go back and show myself these videos and let myself see what good classroom management looks like and what curriculum should look like for a middle school program, and just see how to differentiate instruction for individual students. And I just can't do that. You can't go back in time and show yourself videos. So I'm trying to do the next best thing, and that's to go ahead and make those videos as if I was going to show them to myself as a beginning teacher, the things that I would have wanted to have known, and I'll give other people that opportunity. So I'll let them have a chance to see them and hopefully not have to go through the same struggle that I went through for 14 years.
All right, Eric, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct?
I like to listen to the teaching music through performance and series. There's a lot of good music in there. And one of the things that happens is I listen to it and I get depressed about the stuff that's over middle school's head. But there's one song in particular. It's Shadows of Eternity. And I just love the sound of that song, the emotion, the mood in it. And it's just a little bit above the ability level of my kids right now. So I've kind of made it a goal of mine that someday in my career, over the next 15 years, I want to have a group that can reach out and be able to play that expressively. So it's a goal of mine to be able to play that song.
All right, Eric. So is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Sure. Basically, just my websites, the Thoughts from a Beginning Band Director, and specifically Sound Beginnings. I have not posted anything on Sound Beginnings since school has started. I've been trying to kind of get in the groove of things myself and get all my paperwork done and that kind of stuff, but I'm catching up this weekend. And I plan to start putting out some videos geared for teachers here in the next week, talking about my curriculum and my program in general, and then showing some of the actual class lessons and how things are put together. And I would say, especially be on the lookout around the first week of October, whenever full band starts, and you can see how I set out the expectations for the kids and just the rehearsal procedures.
Excellent, Eric. This was great.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. It's kind of it's an honor, and very surprised actually that you picked some random guy in the middle of a cornfield.
No, you're not random. I mean, people are following your stuff. You're providing something in the community. Hardly random.
Well, it's an honor to be able to help. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being on the show. How can people get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me would be through my email address, which is ecombs, that's ECOMES, at rccu and then the number 1.net. Or if you just want to get a hold of me on Messenger, I've probably had 75 to 100 people get a hold of me that way here in the last couple of months, just asking full band questions. So you can find me on the Thoughts from the Beginning Band Director site. Look me up that way, or just look at Eric Combs. And you'll see my profile picture is just a little music note there. And I enjoy answering questions from people. I get them all hours of the night. I've got somebody in Taiwan that's been asking questions in the morning. But I welcome these things. I appreciate them. So don't feel like you're bugging me. I like the opportunity to talk about things.
Excellent. All right, Eric. Thanks so much.
Thank you.